Story 1. The Signal That Never Came. I still remember the exact moment the signal disappeared. Not flickered, not malfunctioned. Disappeared. 1 second, the green indicator for Station 47 glowed steady on my console. The next, there was just absence. Not darkness, not a blank screen, just a space where something should have been but wasn't anymore. I've operated Line 8 for 17 years. I know every signal, every switch, every slight tremor in the rails. But that night, the system forgot something existed, and I had to keep driving toward it. My name is Catherine Vance, and I've been a train operator for the Metropolitan Transit Authority for 17 years. I work the late shift on Line 8, the route that runs through the industrial district and terminates at the northeastern edge of the city. It's not glamorous work. Most nights I transport a handful of third-shift workers, a few students coming home from late library sessions, and the occasional person who simply has nowhere else to be. The train is rarely more than a quarter full after midnight, and by 2 in the morning it's often just me and the hum of the electric motors pushing through the dark. I've always appreciated the solitude. There's something meditative about piloting several tons of steel through tunnels carved a century ago, following the same route night after night. The routine becomes second nature. You learn the rhythm of the rails, the slight dip before Station 32, the curve that always squeals near the old switching yard, the brief moment of complete darkness between Stations 45 and 46, where the tunnel lighting has never quite worked right. On the night it happened, everything started exactly as it always did. I clocked in at 11:47 p.m., performed my standard pre-departure inspection, checked the brake systems, reviewed the automated safety logs, and pulled out of the depot at 12:03 a.m. My first outbound run was routine. 14 passengers boarded at various points. Most got off before we reached the industrial stretch. By the time I was heading back inbound on my second cycle around 1:30 a.m., I had exactly 3 passengers aboard, all in separate cars, all absorbed in their phones or sleep. The signal system on Line 8 is straightforward. A series of indicator lights on my console correspond to each station and track section ahead. Green means clear to proceed. Yellow means reduce speed. Red means stop. It's a system I've trusted implicitly for nearly 2 decades. Every signal has a backup. Every backup has a failsafe, and every failsafe has a manual override protocol. The system is redundant to the point of paranoia. Station 46 came and went without incident. 1 passenger disembarked. I had 2 left, both in the rear cars, both invisible to me except as data points on my passenger counter. I accelerated into the tunnel towards Station 47, a small platform that primarily serves a packaging warehouse and a 24-hour distribution center. At this hour, it's almost always empty, but protocol requires me to stop regardless. I was approximately 40 seconds from the station when I glanced at my console to confirm the approach signal. That's when I noticed it. The indicator for Station 47 wasn't there. I don't mean the light was out. I mean the physical space where the indicator should have been displayed on my screen was simply absent, as if the station had been edited out of reality. The indicators for Stations 46 and 48 were present and normal, but 47 had vanished. I blinked hard, assuming fatigue was playing tricks with my vision. I looked away, focused on the tunnel ahead, then looked back. The absence remained. I felt a small flutter of anxiety, the kind that comes when something fundamental to your understanding of your environment suddenly doesn't make sense. I checked my speed, 42 miles per hour, normal for this section. I checked my brake pressure, nominal. Everything else on the console appeared perfectly standard. I reached for my radio to contact Central Dispatch. Before I could press the transmit button, the tunnel lighting changed. The overhead lights, which had been their usual harsh, fluorescent white, dimmed to a sickly amber, then flickered once, twice, and settled into a steady but noticeably weaker illumination. The quality of light reminded me of old photographs, like I was suddenly moving through a sepia-toned memory rather than a physical space. The radio crackled before I could speak. Not the normal white noise of an open channel, but a rhythmic static that almost sounded like breathing. I released the transmit button and listened. The pattern continued for maybe 10 seconds, then stopped abruptly, leaving only silence. According to my position indicator, I was now 15 seconds from station 47. I could feel the slight deceleration as the train's automated systems began the approach sequence. But there was no signal on my console, no confirmation that the station existed as a valid stop point. I experienced a surreal moment of cognitive dissonance. My body knew the station was ahead. My muscle memory prepared for the familiar routine of stopping, opening doors, waiting the required 20 seconds, closing doors and accelerating away. But my instruments insisted I was approaching a void. The train began its final deceleration. Through the front windscreen, I could see the tunnel opening into the broader space of a station platform. The lighting there was the same sickly amber as the tunnel, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch in directions that didn't quite align with the light sources. I applied manual braking, supplementing the automatic systems, bringing the train to a smooth stop with the doors aligned to the platform markings. Station 47 looked exactly as it always did. Gray concrete platform, yellow safety line, faded advertisements for services that had gone out of business years ago. A single bench that had been broken and unrepaired for as long as I'd been running this route. But there was something wrong with the stillness. Stations are never completely still. There's always some ambient noise, ventilation systems, distant train rumbles, the settling sounds of old infrastructure. This was a different quality of silence, dense and expectant. I waited for my passenger readout to update, to show if anyone was boarding or disembarking. The screen remained blank. The platform was empty. No one waiting, no one moving. Just that terrible amber light and those wrong-angled shadows. Protocol required me to open the doors. I hesitated for the first time in my career, my hand hovering over the control. Every instinct screamed at me to simply accelerate away, to skip this stop, to report a technical malfunction later. But 17 years of training and procedure are difficult to override. I opened the doors. The sound was wrong. The pneumatic hiss of the doors should have echoed normally in the station space. Instead, it seemed muted, absorbed by something I couldn't identify. I watched my mirrors scanning the platform. Nothing moved. After 15 seconds, I checked my rear camera feeds. Both passengers were still seated in their respective cars, apparently unaware that anything was unusual. Neither attempted to exit. I was about to close the doors and continue when the intercom system activated. Not my intercom. I hadn't pressed any buttons. The speakers throughout the train crackled to life, and a voice emerged from the static. My voice. I was hearing my own voice coming through the announcement system, but I wasn't speaking. The voice, my voice, said, "This is Station 47, final boarding call for passengers continuing to Station 48. Please note that after this stop, there are no further stations on this line. This is the last opportunity to disembark before the terminal point." I felt my skin go cold. There were 4 more stations after Station 47. Station 48 wasn't the terminus. The actual end of the line was Station 51, a major hub that connected to 3 other lines. Whoever, whatever, had just made that announcement was providing false information, using my voice. I immediately pressed my own intercom button, intending to correct the statement, to reassure my passengers. When I spoke, my voice came through the speakers normally, overlaying but not replacing that other version of myself that continued speaking in the background. 2 versions of my voice saying different things simultaneously. Passengers, please disregard the previous announcement. This is a routine stop. We will continue to all scheduled stations. But underneath my words, that other voice kept talking, saying things I wasn't saying. The tunnels beyond this point are not on the current map. The tunnels beyond this point have been closed since the incident. The tunnels beyond this point should not be accessed by passenger trains. I released the intercom button, and both voices stopped. The silence that followed felt predatory. I made a decision. I closed the doors without completing the full 20-second stop protocol and immediately radioed Central Dispatch. Central, this is Operator Vance on train 804, line 8 inbound. I'm experiencing equipment malfunction at Station 47. Unauthorized intercom activation and signal display errors. Requesting permission to skip remaining stops and proceed directly to depot for maintenance inspection. The response came back immediately, which was unusual for this hour. Usually there's at least a few seconds of delay. Train 804, negative on your report. Our systems show all equipment functioning normally. No irregularities detected. You are cleared to continue your route as scheduled. I felt a wave of frustration mixed with fear. Central, I'm telling you, I just heard an unauthorized announcement using my voice. The console is showing Station 47 as non-existent in the signal display. Something is wrong. Another immediate response. Train 804 station records confirm your stop at Station 47 was completed within normal parameters. Duration, 22 seconds. No announcements were broadcast during that period. Please confirm you are feeling well enough to continue operating. 22 seconds. I had stopped for 15 seconds at most, and I definitely had broadcast an announcement. 2 announcements overlapping. But Central's systems disagreed with my direct experience. The implication was clear. Either their systems were malfunctioning or I was. I checked my passenger count, still 2. I accelerated away from Station 47, and as the train picked up speed, the tunnel lighting returned to its normal harsh white. The console display suddenly updated, and the indicator for Station 47 reappeared in its proper position, showing green as if it had never been absent. I completed the rest of my route in a state of tightly controlled panic. Stations 48 through 51 passed without incident. Both passengers disembarked at their intended stops, neither showing any indication that they'd experienced anything unusual. When I finally returned to the depot at the end of my shift, I immediately filed a formal incident report detailing everything that had occurred. The maintenance supervisor reviewed my report and then checked the train's onboard diagnostic logs. According to the logs, every system had functioned perfectly throughout my shift. No anomalies in the intercom system, no signal display errors. The audio recording system, which captures all intercom announcements for safety review, contained only my single corrective announcement to passengers. The other voice, my voice, saying those impossible things, wasn't in the recording. They still pulled the train from service for a complete inspection. 3 days later, I received the report. Every system passed. No faults found. The incident was classified as operator fatigue and perceptual confusion, and I was mandated to take 3 personal days before returning to duty. I've been back on Line 8 for 4 months now. Every time I approach Station 47, my heart rate increases and my hands tighten on the controls. The station appears normal. The signals work correctly. The stops proceed routinely, but I can't forget that amber light, that dense silence, and especially that voice. Last week, during a standard stop at Station 47, I noticed something I'd never seen before. On the far wall of the platform, partially obscured by shadows near the tunnel entrance, there was a service door I'd never noticed in 17 years. It was open just slightly, maybe an inch or 2. As the train pulled away, I could have sworn I saw movement in that gap. Just a flicker, like someone stepping back into deeper darkness. I didn't report it. What would I say? That I saw a door I'd somehow missed for nearly 2 decades? That something might have been watching from inside it? They already think the first incident was psychological. Another report would probably result in a mandatory psychological evaluation, and I can't afford to lose this job. But I think about that announcement constantly. The tunnels beyond this point have been closed since the incident. What incident? I've searched through the MTA's historical records looking for any line closures, accidents, or unusual events associated with Station 47 or the surrounding sections. The deepest archives I can access go back 60 years. There's nothing. Yet something knows. Something that can speak with my voice, that can manipulate the systems I've trusted my entire career, that can create pockets of wrong time and wrong space in the middle of an ordinary route. Something that wanted to warn me, or perhaps to invite me to step through that door and discover what lies beyond the stations we acknowledge exist. I still operate Line 8. I still make that stop at Station 47 multiple times per shift. I still follow protocol, opening the doors, waiting the required duration, closing the doors and continuing to the next station. But every single time I find myself holding my breath, waiting to see if that amber light returns, if that silence descends again, if that other version of my voice will speak and tell me something true about the network of tunnels I thought I knew. Some signals aren't meant to guide you to your destination. Some signals are warnings about paths that should never be followed. And sometimes the absence of a signal is the loudest warning of all. Story 2, the dispatcher's lost call. The call came through on Line 7 at 3:47 a.m., the same line that had been out of service for maintenance since midnight. I stared at the blinking indicator on my board, watching it pulse with increasing urgency. When I finally answered, the voice on the other end described, with perfect clarity, the derailment at Station 29 that would kill 14 people. The derailment that wouldn't happen for another 6 hours. Or had it already happened? By the time I hung up, I wasn't sure which direction time was moving anymore, or if the voice I'd been speaking to was trying to prevent something or ensure it. My name is Dennis Porter, and I've been a central dispatcher for Metro Rail for 23 years. I work the overnight shift in Central Control, a windowless room 4 stories beneath the city's main transit hub where every train movement, every signal change, every platform announcement flows through a wall of monitors and communication systems that would look like something from a spacecraft to anyone who didn't understand urban transit infrastructure. People think driving the trains is the challenging job, but they're wrong. Drivers follow routes and respond to signals. Dispatchers create the signals. We orchestrate the entire ballet of metal and electricity, ensuring that hundreds of trains navigate the same limited space without ever occupying it simultaneously. We are the invisible conductors, and the subway is our symphony. The overnight shift is different from days. After the last scheduled passenger trains complete their routes around 1:30 a.m., the system belongs to maintenance crews, equipment testing, and the occasional emergency movement. My shift, which runs from midnight to 8 a.m., is typically quiet. I coordinate work train movements, monitor automated systems testing, and serve as the emergency contact point for any unusual situations. Most nights, I spend more time reviewing safety protocols and completing administrative reports than actively managing train movements. I've always preferred this shift. There's a clarity to working when the chaos of daily operations is absent. The system reveals its true architecture in these hours, stripped of the noise of human urgency. You can hear the subtle sounds the infrastructure makes when it's not overwhelmed. The harmonic hum of power distribution, the rhythmic cycling of ventilation systems, the occasional metallic groan of rails expanding or contracting with temperature changes. The night it started, I was 6 hours into my shift. It was a Tuesday, or technically early Wednesday morning in late October. I had 3 work trains active, one in the northern tunnel section performing signal upgrades, one on the eastern line replacing worn rail sections, and one in the central maintenance depot undergoing routine inspection. All 3 were in constant radio contact, checking in every 20 minutes as per protocol. At 3:47 a.m., the communication board lit up with an incoming call on line 7. I stared at the indicator for several seconds, confused. Line 7 had been closed for a complete track resurfacing project since midnight. No trains were authorized on that line, work or otherwise. The entire electrical system for that line had been powered down at 12:30 a.m. There was no possible way for a train to be operating there, and even if there were without power, there would be no way for its communication system to function. I checked my activity log to confirm I hadn't made an error. Line 7 showed as closed, unpowered, and empty. Yet the call indicator continued blinking, insistent and regular. I considered ignoring it, assuming it was some kind of system glitch, a stray electrical signal finding its way into the communication network. But 23 years of training had taught me that unexplained signals in a transit system are never safely ignored. I answered the call. Central Control Dispatcher Porter, identify your position and authorization. Static filled my headset, but underneath it I could hear something else. Not mechanical noise, but the sound of space. The particular acoustic quality of being inside a train car, that specific resonance of contained volume moving through a tunnel. Someone or something was transmitting from inside a train on line 7. Then a voice emerged from the static. Male, young, stressed. Central, this is train 712. Line 7 southbound. We've got a serious situation here. The brakes aren't responding correctly. I'm approaching station 29 at excessive speed. I can't slow down. Repeat, I cannot establish proper braking response. I felt my pulse spike immediately. Emergency situations trigger a cascade of automatic responses in the experienced dispatcher. Assess, verify, act. But even as my training kicked in, my rational mind was screaming contradictions. There was no train 712 operating. There was no power on line 7. Station 29 on line 7 had been closed for renovation for the past 2 weeks. Train 712, confirm your authorization code and current passenger count, I responded, buying time to make sense of the situation while pulling up every available diagnostic for line 7 on my monitors. The voice came back immediately. Authorization code Delta 77 Mike. Passenger count is 47. Central, you need to evacuate Station 29 immediately. We're going to hit the platform at speed. I'm looking at 65 miles per hour and unable to reduce. Impact in approximately 90 seconds. My screen showed line 7 as completely dark. No train signatures, no power consumption, no signal activity. But the voice on the radio was describing an emergency with the kind of specific panic detail that would be almost impossible to fabricate. I made a decision. All personnel, this is Central Control. Emergency alert on line 7, Station 29, possible train in distress. All nearby units respond for potential evacuation and medical support. I was issuing orders for a situation my instruments insisted wasn't happening. I kept the line open to train 712. Operator, attempt manual brake override sequence Beta 3. Confirm you're engaging emergency brake systems. Already done, the voice responded, now with audible fear. Manual override is not responding. It's like the system doesn't recognize the input. 60 seconds to Station 29. Central, there are people on the platform. I can see them through the windscreen. You need to get them out of there. My rational mind finally caught up with a crucial detail. Train 712. You stated Station 29 has people on the platform. That station is closed for renovation. No passengers should be present. A pause. When the voice returned, it sounded confused. What do you mean closed? It's fully operational. I can see approximately 20 people waiting. The platform looks normal. Central, what's happening? 30 seconds to impact. I pulled up historical records on my secondary screen while keeping my primary focused on the supposedly dead Line 7. I searched for any incidents involving Train 712. The train number had been retired 7 years ago after a minor collision that resulted in the train's permanent decommissioning. The last operator assigned to Train 712 had been named Andrew Moss. He had transferred to another city's transit system 3 years ago. Train 712, confirm operator name, I said quietly. Operator Andrew Moss. Central, 15 seconds. I can't stop it. I can't. The line cut to pure static. Not silence, but an aggressive, crackling wall of noise that made me rip the headset off my ears. The sound was so intense I could hear it leaking from the headset even at arm's length. It lasted for approximately 10 seconds, then cut to complete silence. I sat frozen, staring at my monitors, waiting for something. Emergency alerts from Station 29, reports from the maintenance crews, anything that would confirm what had just happened. Nothing came. Line 7 remained dark and lifeless on my displays. I immediately radioed the maintenance supervisor for the crew that was supposed to be working near that sector. Maintenance 7, this is Central Control. Report your current position and any unusual activity in your sector. The response came back calm and routine. Central, we're at Junction 14, approximately 2 kilometers north of Station 29's maintenance entrance. No activity to report, everything's quiet down here. Maintenance 7, proceed to Station 29 and perform a visual inspection of the platform and surrounding track. Report any anomalies immediately. Understood, Central. Proceeding to Station 29. While I waited, I reviewed every communication log from the past hour, searching for any indication that the call from Train 712 had actually occurred. The system maintained detailed records of all radio traffic, including timestamps, transmission lengths, and audio recordings. I found my own transmissions, the emergency alert I'd issued, my attempted communication with Train 712. But there was no record of any incoming transmission. According to the logs, I had been speaking to silence, asking questions and issuing instructions to no one. 20 minutes later, Maintenance 7 reported back. Central, we've completed inspection of Station 29. Platform is clear as expected. Track shows no signs of recent train activity. Some dust accumulation consistent with 2 weeks of closure. Nothing unusual. I thanked them and closed the channel. I sat in the silent control room, surrounded by the soft glow of monitors displaying information I no longer entirely trusted. I had experienced something that left no trace, that existed only in my memory. I could have dismissed it, could have classified it as an unusually vivid auditory hallucination, a product of fatigue and the weird psychological effects of working overnight in a windowless room beneath the city. But I couldn't shake the specificity of the details. The authorization code, Delta 77 Mike. The operator's name, Andrew Moss. The passenger count of 47. The impact speed of 65 miles per hour. These weren't vague, dreamlike elements. They were precise data points. Over the following week, I quietly researched. I accessed archived incident reports, historical operations logs, and even old personnel files from 7 years ago. What I found made everything worse. Train 712 had indeed been decommissioned 7 years ago, but not because of a minor collision. It had been involved in a catastrophic brake failure on Line 7 at Station 29. The train had entered the station at 63 miles per hour. 47 passengers had been aboard. The operator, Andrew Moss, had transmitted emergency calls to Central Control for 90 seconds before impact. 14 people had died on the platform. Moss and 33 passengers had been injured, some critically. The incident had been kept relatively quiet. No major media coverage. A quick settlement with the victims' families. Immediate safety upgrades across the entire system. It had occurred almost exactly 7 years before my experience to the day. October 23rd. The authorization code Moss had given me during the call, Delta 77 Mike, matched the code listed in the incident report from 7 years ago. I had received a call from a train that crashed 7 years in the past, or I had received a call from 7 years ago that traveled forward to reach me now. Or something else entirely was happening. Something that didn't fit into any framework of time and causality that made sense. I considered reporting this to my supervisor, but the same instinct that made me answer that original call also told me that officially documenting what I'd experienced would end badly for me. Mandatory psychological evaluation. Possible removal from dispatch duties. The incident existed only in my memory and in archived reports that no one had any reason to review. So I kept working. I kept my overnight shifts, monitoring the screens, coordinating the limited nighttime movements, maintaining the system's nocturnal operations. And every night at exactly 3:47 a.m., I found myself staring at the Line 7 indicator, waiting to see if it would light up again. 3 weeks passed. I began to relax slightly to convince myself that whatever had happened was a singular anomaly, unrepeatable and inexplicable, but ultimately isolated. Then on a Thursday morning at 3:47 a.m., the Line 7 indicator lit up again. I answered immediately. Central Control, Dispatcher Porter. The same static, the same underlying resonance of a train car in motion, then a different voice, female this time, older. Central, this is train 704, line 7 northbound. I'm experiencing unusual signal behavior. The indicators are showing me conflicting information. I'm being told to proceed through switches that should be locked. Central, something's wrong with the control system. I pulled up the records. Train 704, active until 9 years ago. Retired after repeated electrical faults. Last operator, Helen Caraway, now retired, living 3 states away. I checked the date of its decommissioning, November 14th, today's date. Train 704, confirm your current position and passenger count, I said, my voice steady despite the ice spreading through my chest. Position marker 47, approximately 3 kilometers north of Station 18. Passenger count is 32. Central, the signals are changing too rapidly. I can't keep up with the switching instructions. It's like the system is confused, like it doesn't know what route I'm supposed to be following. I walked her through standard diagnostic procedures, knowing they wouldn't work, knowing this train existed somewhere else. When else. We maintained contact for 8 minutes, then exactly like before, the transmission cut to aggressive static and died. I filed no report. I contacted no one. When maintenance checked that section of Line 7 hours later as part of routine work, they found nothing unusual. The pattern established itself over the following months. Every 3 to 4 weeks, always at 3:47 a.m., always on lines that were closed or powered down, I would receive a call from a train that shouldn't exist. Different trains, different operators, different emergencies, but always trains that had been involved in actual documented incidents. Always operators speaking from the dates of those incidents. Always describing situations that had already happened years in the past. I became an archivist of phantom disasters. I kept a private log locked in my desk drawer documenting each call. Train numbers, operator names, incident descriptions, dates. I cross-referenced everything against historical records. Every single call matched a real incident from the system's history. The earliest was Train 689, transmitting from 19 years ago. The most recent was Train 735, from just 14 months prior. What disturbed me most wasn't the calls themselves, but the gradual realization of what they represented. These weren't recordings or echoes. The operators responded to my questions, engaged in real-time dialogue, reacted with genuine emotion. They were experiencing their emergencies in the present tense, even though those emergencies had already concluded years ago. Time was folded, layered, bleeding through itself in the tunnels beneath the city. And then I started noticing the progression. Each call came from an incident that was closer to the present. 19 years, 14 years, 9 years, 7 years, 14 months. The pattern was accelerating. The timeline was collapsing. The past approaching the present like a train I couldn't divert or stop. Last month, I received a call that changed everything. It came at 3:47 a.m. on Line 3, which was active and running scheduled maintenance movements. I answered, expecting to hear from one of the work crews. Instead, I heard my own voice. Central Control. This is Dispatcher Porter in Secondary Control Room. We have a catastrophic systems failure in Central. Multiple trains are receiving conflicting signals. The automation has failed. I'm trying to coordinate manual overrides, but I don't have access to the primary communication array. Central, if you can hear this, you need to initiate emergency shutdown protocol immediately. We're going to have multiple collisions across the network within the next 12 minutes. I sat frozen, listening to myself describe a disaster that hadn't happened yet. Or had it? My monitors showed normal operations. No failures, no conflicts, no emergency indicators. But my own voice, stressed and urgent, was insisting that everything was collapsing around me. This is Central Control, I finally responded. I'm receiving you, but all systems show normal. Can you clarify the nature of the failure? The other me paused. When he spoke again, his voice was confused. Central? Who is this? This channel should be automated. Why are you on this frequency? This is Dispatcher Dennis Porter in Central Control. Who are you? Another pause, longer this time. This is Dispatcher Dennis Porter in Secondary Control. Central, what date do you show? I told him. I heard what sounded like a sharp intake of breath. That's 6 months ago, my voice said quietly. Central, I'm transmitting from 6 months in your future. And I'm telling you that what's about to happen begins tonight. Check your systems. Check Line 7. There's something in the network that shouldn't be there. Something that's been building for years. The calls you've been receiving, they're not just echoes, they're warnings. And tonight, it reaches you. The line went dead. Not static this time, just instant, complete silence. I checked Line 7. For the first time since that initial call, it showed active. A train signature moving southbound, approaching Station 29. No authorization, no scheduled movement, no power consumption that would allow for operation. Just a ghost in the system traveling toward a station that had been rebuilt after being destroyed 7 years ago. I'm watching it now as I write this. The signature moves steadily along Line 7, following the same route Train 712 took. It's approaching Station 29. My monitors show no train, but the signal is there, undeniable. I should sound the alarm. I should evacuate. I should initiate emergency protocols, but the system insists nothing is wrong. And if I act on information that exists only on this one anomalous screen, I'll be removed from this position immediately. They'll say I'm unstable, that the stress of the overnight shift has broken something in my perception. So I'm sitting here watching a train that doesn't exist approach a station that shouldn't be operational, while my own voice from 6 months in the future warns me that this is where it all begins. The signal is 50 seconds from Station 29 now. 45, 40. I think I understand now. The tunnels don't just carry trains through space, they carry them through time. Every disaster, every emergency, every moment of crisis leaves an impression in the infrastructure, a recording that plays back under the right conditions. And somehow I've become the receiver, the single point where all these temporal fragments converge. 20 seconds, 15. The signal is at Station 29. It's stopping. The indicator shows doors opening, closing. A 22-second stop, exactly as protocol requires. Then it accelerates away, continuing southbound toward the next station. Nothing happened. No crash, no disaster, just a routine stop by a train that doesn't exist. But my phone is ringing now. The landline on my desk, the number that only internal MTA personnel know. I'm afraid to answer it, because I know what I'm going to hear. I'm going to hear my own voice calling from somewhere in time, giving me another piece of the pattern, another clue to what's building in the tunnels beneath the city. The phone keeps ringing. My monitors show normal operations. And somewhere in the network, in the spaces between the trains we track and the stations we acknowledge, something is moving toward a conclusion I haven't witnessed yet. I'm going to answer the phone now, and I'm going to listen to what I have to tell myself. Because in a system where the past is calling the present and the future is warning the past, the only way forward is through the signal. Story 3. The tunnel that shouldn't be there. I've walked every inch of the Metro North tunnel system. 22 years as a tunnel maintenance inspector means I know every service door, every ventilation shaft, every electrical junction in 400 miles of underground infrastructure. I know which sections smell like rust, which ones echo strangely, which ones are 5 degrees colder than they should be. So when I found myself standing in front of a tunnel entrance that doesn't appear on any schematic, any blueprint, any map ever produced for this system, I knew immediately that I was looking at something that had been deliberately forgotten. The symbols carved into the concrete around that entrance weren't graffiti, they were warnings. And I walked past them anyway. My name is Richard Mallory, and I have worked as a senior tunnel maintenance inspector for Metropolitan Transit Authority for 22 years. My job is to ensure the structural integrity and operational safety of the underground infrastructure that keeps the city moving. I inspect tunnel walls for cracks, monitor drainage systems, verify electrical installations, check ventilation equipment, and document any anomalies that might indicate developing problems. It's unglamorous, solitary work that requires attention to detail and a tolerance for confined spaces deep beneath the city. I work alone most of the time. The tunnel environment isn't conducive to conversation, and the work requires focus. You're walking in darkness, interrupted by periodic maintenance lights, listening to the sounds of water dripping through concrete, monitoring your air quality sensor, marking your position on your tracking device every 500 meters, and examining surfaces that most people will never see. You develop a relationship with the tunnels. You learn their moods, their particular characteristics, the way they respond to weather changes, seasonal variations, and the vibrations from train traffic. I've always been methodical. My inspection reports are detailed and comprehensive. My route logs are precise. My equipment is maintained to manufacturer specifications and checked before every shift. In 22 years, I've never missed a scheduled inspection, never failed to document a deficiency, never cut corners on safety protocols. This attention to detail has earned me seniority status and the authority to conduct independent inspections without direct supervision. The tunnel network is vast and complex. The oldest sections date back over a century, built with techniques and materials that would never pass modern codes. Newer sections incorporate advanced materials and monitoring systems. But all of it connects, a sprawling underground maze that extends far beyond the passenger tunnels most people imagine when they think of the subway. There are service tunnels, ventilation corridors, emergency access passages, abandoned construction attempts, sealed-off sections from earlier expansion plans, and utility conduits that predate the transit system itself. Every accessible section is documented. The schematics are updated regularly, maintained in both physical and digital formats. I carry a tablet with complete system maps, showing every tunnel, every junction, every service entrance. I know these maps better than I know the streets above ground. On October 15th, I was conducting a routine structural inspection of Sector 17J, a service tunnel that runs parallel to the main passenger line between stations 34 and 35. This section is older infrastructure, built in the 1930s during a major expansion phase. The tunnel shows its age. The concrete has the characteristic surface crazing of early century construction. The electrical conduits are mounted in outdated metal housings, and the ventilation is provided by natural convection rather than forced air systems. I had walked this particular tunnel dozens of times over my career. I knew every crack, every water stain, every place where the walls had been patched after minor earthquake damage 15 years ago. I was approximately 1 kilometer into my inspection, working my way methodically along the western wall when I noticed something that stopped me completely. There was a junction I didn't recognize. On the eastern wall, approximately 20 meters ahead of my position, an opening led into what appeared to be a side tunnel. I stood motionless, shining my headlamp at this impossible feature. I pulled out my tablet and confirmed my position using the GPS tracker. I was exactly where I thought I was in a section I had inspected 4 months earlier. I pulled up the schematic for this tunnel. It showed a smooth, continuous wall exactly where I was now seeing an opening. I approached slowly. The opening was roughly 7 feet high and 6 feet wide, large enough to walk through comfortably. The edges were finished concrete, not jagged as they would be if this were the result of structural failure or unauthorized excavation. This was intentional construction. The tunnel beyond extended into darkness beyond the reach of my headlamp. Around the entrance, carved directly into the concrete in letters approximately 3 inches high, were symbols. Not graffiti. These were carved with professional precision, the edges clean and deliberate. The symbols weren't any written language I recognized. They reminded me of circuit diagrams or mathematical notations, but organized in patterns that seemed more decorative than functional. There were approximately 30 distinct symbols arranged in 3 horizontal rows framing the entrance. I should have stopped there. Protocol required me to document any unmapped feature, report it immediately, and wait for supervision before proceeding with investigation. But 22 years of routine creates a kind of momentum. I had never encountered anything genuinely unusual in all my time in these tunnels. I assumed this was some kind of administrative oversight, a service passage that had been omitted from the digital records but would certainly appear in the older physical archives. I stepped into the unmapped tunnel. The first thing I noticed was the quality of the air. The service tunnel I had been inspecting had the characteristic musty smell of old concrete and inadequate ventilation. The unmapped tunnel smelled different, cleaner, with a faint metallic tang that reminded me of ozone. My air quality monitor showed normal levels of oxygen and no dangerous gases, but the sensor was registering something it identified as unclassified particulate matter at low concentrations. The tunnel extended straight ahead, descending at a gentle slope. The construction technique appeared older than the service tunnel I had left, using cut stone blocks rather than poured concrete. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. The blocks fit together with minimal visible mortar, and the walls were smooth and true despite their obvious age. Every 50 feet or so, there was an alcove carved into the wall, each containing what appeared to be mounting hardware for light fixtures that were no longer present. I walked for approximately 5 minutes, marking my path with chalk on the wall every 100 feet as per standard exploration protocol. The tunnel remained straight and featureless. No side passages, no doors, no utility installations. Just stone walls, a stone floor, and that slow, steady descent into the earth. Then I began to notice the markings. On the walls, carved at irregular intervals, were more of those symbols I had seen at the entrance, but these were different. More elaborate, organized into what looked like equations or instructions. Some were small, barely visible. Others covered entire wall sections, floor to ceiling, in dense arrays of interconnected symbols. I photographed everything, though I had no idea what I was documenting. After what I estimated was 20 minutes of walking, I checked my position on the GPS tracker. It showed me as still standing at the entrance to the unmapped tunnel. The device had stopped updating. I checked my radio, intending to call this in despite my earlier decision to investigate first. The radio produced only static on all channels, including the emergency frequency that's supposed to be accessible from anywhere in the tunnel system. I should have turned back immediately. Loss of GPS and radio communication meant I was beyond the range of the safety monitoring systems. If something happened to me in this space, no one would know where to search. But I had marked my path. I could follow the chalk marks back to the service tunnel. And I was intensely curious about where this tunnel led and why it had been omitted from all modern documentation. I continued walking. The descent became more pronounced. The symbols on the walls grew more dense and complex. And I began to notice that the tunnel wasn't quite as straight as I had initially thought. There was a very gentle curve to the right, so gradual that it was barely perceptible. But over the distance I had traveled, the direction had shifted noticeably. I was no longer walking parallel to the service tunnel above. I was spiraling inward, descending towards something central. After another 15 minutes, the tunnel opened into a chamber. I stopped at the threshold, sweeping my headlamp across the space. The chamber was roughly circular, approximately 50 feet in diameter, with a domed ceiling that rose 30 feet above the floor. Every surface, walls, floor, ceiling, was covered in those carved symbols, organized into concentric rings that drew the eye toward the center of the space. In the exact center of the chamber was a circular pit, maybe 12 feet in diameter, ringed by a low stone wall. I approached carefully and looked down. The pit descended vertically into darkness that swallowed my headlamp beam. I dropped a piece of loose stone into it and listened. I counted 7 seconds before I heard it hit something, which suggested a depth of approximately 800 feet. Far deeper than any standard tunnel construction. On the wall of the chamber, directly opposite the tunnel entrance, was a metal plaque. Unlike everything else in this space, the plaque was modern, stainless steel, professionally engraved, mounted with recent hardware. The text was in English. It read, "Mapping Survey Team, October 1967, depth achieved 2,200 feet. Further descent suspended by administrative order. This access point to be sealed and omitted from official records. Authority Director's Office, MTA Infrastructure Planning." I photographed the plaque and read it 3 more times, trying to understand the implications. This tunnel, this chamber, this impossible pit had been discovered and explored 57 years ago. And someone with sufficient authority had ordered it sealed and erased from the system's documentation. Except it wasn't sealed. It was open, accessible, exactly as the 1967 survey team had left it. I circled the chamber slowly, examining the symbol arrays on the walls. In several places I found carved dates. The earliest I found was 1847. The most recent was 1923. 76 years of people descending into this space, adding their marks to whatever had existed before. And then, in 1967, the decision to forget it entirely. I approached the pit again and shone my headlamp straight down. About 40 feet below, I could see the top of a metal ladder bolted to the wall of the shaft. The 1967 survey team had installed descent equipment. They had gone down there, down to 2,200 feet, according to the plaque. That's roughly twice the depth of the deepest subway tunnel in the city. I think I stood there for 5 minutes, maybe longer, staring into that pit. Every protocol, every safety regulation, every survival instinct I possessed was screaming at me to leave immediately. But there was something else, stronger than caution, a need to understand. to know what was down there that had caused 57 years of institutional silence. I did not descend. That much survival instinct remained intact. But I did notice something that made the situation significantly worse. Hanging from one of the ladder rungs about 50 feet down was a piece of equipment. I could just barely make out its shape in the darkness. It was a modern LED headlamp, the same model I was wearing, the same model issued to all current tunnel inspection personnel. Someone else had been down there recently. Someone from the MTA. And given that this tunnel didn't exist in any official documentation, that person had found it the same way I had, by accident or by following rumors, and they had descended into that pit. I took comprehensive photographs of the chamber, the pit, the plaque, and as many of the symbol arrays as I could document in the time I felt safe remaining. Then I followed my chalk marks back to the service tunnel. The return walk took approximately 35 minutes, which was longer than the outbound journey, suggesting the descent had been steeper than I'd realized. When I emerged back into the mapped section of Sector 17J, my GPS tracker immediately reacquired signal and my radio crackled back to life with normal traffic. I marked the entrance to the unmapped tunnel on my physical inspection form and took GPS coordinates. Then I returned to the surface and wrote the most detailed incident report of my career. I included all photographs, precise location data, and my observations about the 1967 plaque. I submitted it directly to the Infrastructure Planning Director's office, as indicated by the plaque's authority citation. 3 days later, I received a response. Not from infrastructure planning, but from an administrative assistant in the legal department. The response was brief. It stated that my report had been reviewed, that the location I described did not correspond to any MTA infrastructure, and that I had likely become disoriented during my inspection and misinterpreted a known feature of Sector 17J. My report would be filed as an incident of temporary spatial confusion, and I was required to attend a single session with the department's psychological services contractor. I attended the session. I didn't argue. I listened to the psychologist explain how the tunnel environment, especially during solitary inspections, could produce vivid perceptual distortions. I accepted the diagnosis of acute stress response and took the recommended 3 days of personal leave. When I returned to work, I requested the assignment for Sector 17J inspection. It was granted. I walked the entire length of that service tunnel, examining the eastern wall with meticulous attention. The junction wasn't there. Where I had clearly seen an opening, there was now only solid wall. Old concrete showing the same surface crazing as the surrounding sections, with no indication of recent modification. But at the location where the entrance had been carved very small into the concrete at ankle height, I found a single symbol. One of the symbols that had been carved in arrays throughout the unmapped tunnel. Just one, barely visible unless you were looking for it specifically. A marker, perhaps. Or a warning. I photographed it and said nothing. Over the following months, I quietly investigated. I accessed physical archives, searched through decades of old construction records, talked to retired MTA workers who had 40 or 50 years with the system. I found references always oblique, always unofficial. A 1953 construction report that mentioned unusual geological features encountered during excavation of Sector 12B, features that required special administrative handling. A 1978 safety memo warning tunnel workers to report any unmapped passages immediately and not attempt independent exploration. A 1991 interview with a retired supervisor who mentioned in passing that certain sections of the system had been grandfathered out of modern documentation for historical preservation reasons. Historical preservation of what? The city was built on bedrock. There shouldn't be anything down there except what we put there ourselves. Last week, I was conducting an inspection in Sector 22G, almost 2 miles from where I found the first unmapped tunnel. On the northern wall, partially hidden behind a modern electrical junction box, I found another entrance. Same size, same construction style, same symbols carved around the frame. My GPS and radio failed the moment I stepped inside. This tunnel also descended, also spiraled inward, also led to a chamber with a central pit. But this chamber was different. The symbol arrays were more complex, the dates carved into the walls were older. The earliest I found was 1803, and the pit was larger, perhaps 20 feet in diameter. There was no plaque in this chamber, but there was equipment near the pit. Modern equipment. A rope descent system properly anchored, extending down into the darkness, and next to it a clipboard with a current year inspection form partially filled out. The handwriting was neat and professional. The name at the top was someone I recognized, an inspector from the Eastern Division. James Garrett. He'd been reported missing 6 weeks ago during a routine tunnel inspection. Search teams had found no trace of him. Now I knew where he was. He had found one of the unmapped tunnels. He had descended into the pit, and he hadn't come back. I photographed the equipment and the inspection form. Then I left, marking the entrance carefully so I could find it again. I haven't reported this discovery. I know how that would end. Another meeting with the psychologist. Another incident report filed under mental health concerns. Another reassignment away from independent inspection duties. Instead, I've been mapping them. Using my off hours, I've been walking sections of the tunnel system that aren't on my official assignment list. Looking for the markers. Those small carved symbols that indicate an entrance to the unmapped network. I've found 8 so far, scattered across the entire system. Each leads down, spiraling inward, toward chambers with pits that descend into impossible depths. I've started to understand the pattern. The symbols aren't random. They're a map of their own, a notation system that shows the relationship between the unmapped tunnels and the structures they're built around. Those pits aren't separate features. They're all openings to the same thing. Something vast that exists beneath the entire city. Something that people have been finding and descending into for at least 2 centuries, and something that the Transit Authority has been systematically covering up for at least 60 years. Last night I descended into the second pit, just 40 feet, enough to reach a platform the 1967 survey team had installed. From there you can see that the pit isn't natural. It's constructed, cut through bedrock with a precision that seems impossible for any technology that should have existed when the dates on the walls suggest it was made. And on the walls of the pit, continuing downward as far as my headlamp could penetrate, are more symbols. But these are different. These aren't carved. They're inlaid with some kind of metal that still gleams after centuries in darkness. And they pulse very faintly with light. Not bright enough to illuminate anything, but enough to be visible once your eyes adjust. The light pulses in rhythm, regular, slow, like a heartbeat, like something breathing far below. I'm going down again tomorrow. I'm going to follow James Garrett's rope as far as it goes. I need to know what's down there. What existed before we built our tunnels, what drew people to carve their records in chambers that officially don't exist, and what the Transit Authority is so desperate to keep hidden that they'll erase passages from all modern documentation. The tunnels we know are just a skin, a surface layer stretched across something older and deeper. And somewhere in that depth, where the light pulses with artificial rhythm, there's an answer to questions I haven't fully formulated yet. Questions about what we built our city on top of, and whether it was ever truly ours to claim. I've left copies of all my documentation, all my photographs, all my position logs with someone I trust. If I don't return from tomorrow's descent, they'll know where to look. Though I suspect they won't find me, just as they didn't find James Garrett. The unmapped tunnels have a way of closing behind you, of rearranging themselves, of making certain that what they want to keep stays kept. But that's a risk I'm willing to accept. Because after 22 years of inspecting concrete and steel, of maintaining the infrastructure we admit exists, I've finally found something genuinely worth exploring. Something that's been waiting beneath our feet, patient and persistent, breathing light into the darkness while we pretend it isn't there. Story 4. The Ghost Train's Last Stop. When I boarded train 1440 for the final run of my shift, I noticed the passenger manifest listed 73 people. The train was empty. Every car, from the operator's cabin to the last seat in the rear coach, was completely devoid of passengers. But as I walked through to verify, I could feel them. The weight distribution of the train was wrong. Too heavy, like every seat was occupied. The air had that specific stuffiness that comes from too many bodies in an enclosed space. And when I returned to the operator's cabin and looked back through the connecting door, I could see indentations in the seats. 73 invisible passengers waiting silently as I piloted them toward a station that wasn't on any schedule. A station that appeared on my route display simply as Final Stop. My name is Margaret Holloway, and I have worked as a night shift train conductor for Metro Transit for 11 years. I'm not the operator who drives the train. I'm the conductor who walks the cars, checking tickets, assisting passengers, monitoring safety, and serving as the primary point of contact for anyone who needs help during their journey. It's a position that requires constant movement, awareness, and a particular kind of patience with people traveling at hours when exhaustion and desperation blur together. The night shift is a different world from daytime operations. The passengers are different. Fewer tourists, more people traveling because they have no other choice. Third shift workers heading to overnight factory jobs. Hospital staff completing late rotations. Students finishing studying in libraries. People leaving bad situations. People heading toward unknown destinations. By the time my shift begins at 11:10 p.m., the character of the transit system has completely changed from the daytime rush of commuters and leisure travelers. I've always preferred these hours. There's an honesty to people traveling at night. The social masks people wear during the day tend to slip away in the fluorescent lighting of a late-night train car. You see people as they actually are. Exhausted, vulnerable, lost, determined, broken, resilient. My job isn't just to check tickets. It's to be a stable presence in a moving space, someone who knows where the train is going even when the passengers don't know where they're headed. I work Line 6, which runs north-south through the city center and out to the residential suburbs. It's a long route, taking approximately 70 minutes to complete a full circuit. During my shift, I typically complete 3 full circuits before the end of service at 2:30 a.m., plus a final repositioning run that takes the train back to the depot. That final run is always empty. No passengers are allowed, as it's technically out of service despite following the same route. On the night it happened, everything started normally. My first 2 circuits were routine. Light passenger loads, maybe 20 people on the entire train at any given time, scattered across 6 cars. A few teenagers coming home from late movies. A nurse I recognized from previous nights. An older man who rode the full circuit twice without getting off, not uncommon. Some people just need the movement, the sense of going somewhere, even if they end up where they started. I completed my second circuit at 1:45 a.m. The train arrived back at the northern terminus right on schedule. The handful of remaining passengers departed. I walked through all 6 cars, checking for personal items left behind, verifying that seats were clear, confirming the cars were empty and ready for the third and final passenger circuit. Everything was clear. At 1:53 a.m. we departed for what should have been the last scheduled service run of the night. The train was empty when we left the station. I had personally verified that, But as I stood in the operator's cabin reviewing my paperwork for the shift-end report I would need to file, I noticed something odd on the passenger management system. The system uses sensors in the cars to estimate passenger count based on weight distribution, infrared detection, and door activation patterns. It's not perfectly accurate, but it gives conductors a general sense of how many people are aboard and where they're concentrated. According to the display, train 1440 was carrying 73 passengers, distributed across all 6 cars, with heaviest concentration in cars 3 and 4. I stared at the display for several seconds, assuming it was a malfunction. The system occasionally registers false positives, though never at this scale. I picked up my radio to report the technical issue to the operator. A woman named Carol, who I'd worked with dozens of times, competent and professional. Carol, the passenger system is showing 73 aboard. That's obviously incorrect. I walked the train myself before departure. It's empty. Her response came back immediately. Yeah, I'm seeing the same data on my console. I figured you'd let me know when you'd checked. Are we definitely clear? Completely clear, I confirmed. Must be a sensor fault. I'll document it for maintenance. Copy that. Let me know if anything changes. I put the radio away and decided to walk the train again just to be absolutely certain. Technical malfunctions happen, but false readings at this level suggested something seriously wrong with the sensing system, and if the sensors were that far off, other systems might be compromised as well. I left the operator's cabin and stepped into the first passenger car. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly, not unusual for these older trains, casting that familiar harsh white glow over the empty seats. The car was 30 feet long, with seating for approximately 40 passengers in the standard configuration of forward-facing double seats on either side of a center aisle. Every seat was visibly empty, but as I walked down the aisle, I felt something that made me stop halfway through the car. The air was wrong. It had a stuffiness, a slight warmth and humidity that comes from breathing bodies in an enclosed space. But there was no one there. I could see every seat, every square foot of floor. The car was objectively, verifiably empty. I continued to the second car. Same configuration, same harsh lighting, same visible emptiness, but the air quality was definitely wrong. And there was something else I couldn't quite identify at first, a sensation that took me several seconds to recognize. The train's suspension felt weighted. I've ridden these trains thousands of times. I know how they move, how they sway on the rails, how the suspension responds to curves and straightaways. The movement was wrong for an empty train. It was moving like it was carrying a full passenger load. By the time I reached the third car, my hands were trembling slightly. I'm not someone who scares easily. I've dealt with violent passengers, medical emergencies, equipment failures, and every variety of human crisis that can occur in a moving train. But this was different. This was a fundamental violation of sensory reality. I could see that the train was empty, but every other sense was telling me it was full. In the third car, I saw the first direct evidence. About halfway down the aisle in a double seat on the left side, the cushions were compressed. Not dramatically, but noticeably, the depression you see when someone is sitting in a seat, when their weight is pressing down on the padding. I approached slowly and stared at it. As I watched, the depression shifted slightly, as if the invisible person sitting there had adjusted their position. I reached out to touch the seat. My hand stopped 6 inches above the cushion, meeting resistance. Not a solid barrier, but something like pressing your hand against a very dense, cold gel. There was a texture to it, a presence. I jerked my hand back. I needed to confirm I wasn't hallucinating. I pulled out my phone and took a photograph of the compressed seat. When I reviewed the image, the compression was visible in the photo. This wasn't a trick of lighting or fatigue. Something was physically affecting the seat cushion. I continued walking through the train, In every car, I found more evidence. Compressed seats. Slight condensation on windows near empty seats, the kind left by exhaled breath. The overhead handrails swaying slightly as if gripped by invisible hands. In the fourth car, I walked through a space near the rear door and felt a sudden cold, like passing very close to another person, the thermal exchange that happens when two bodies share proximity. I returned to the operator's cabin, moving faster than I wanted to, fighting the urge to run. Carol looked up when I entered, and whatever she saw in my face made her expression shift to concern. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Stop the train," I said quietly. "What?" "We're 3 minutes from Station 34. I can't just stop the train. Now." She must have heard something in my voice that overrode protocol, because she immediately began the emergency stopping procedure. The train decelerated rapidly, the brakes engaging with their characteristic high-pitched squeal. We came to a full stop in the tunnel, approximately halfway between Station 33 and Station 34. "Talk to me," Carol said. "What's happening?" I told her what I'd found: the compressed seats, the wrong air quality, the cold spots, the weighted suspension. She listened without interrupting, and I watched her expression shift from concern to something closer to fear. When I finished, she turned to her console and pointed at a display I hadn't noticed before. "The route schedule has changed," she said quietly. "Look at this." I leaned over her shoulder. The route display, which should have shown the remaining stations on Line 6's northbound service, showed something different. After Station 34, there was one additional stop listed, not a standard station name. Those were all numbers or neighborhood names. This one was labeled simply, "Final Stop." "That's not on Line 6, I said. "There's no station called Final Stop. The northern terminus is Station 41. "I know," Carol replied, "but the system is now showing this as our scheduled destination. And look at this." She pulled up the route map. The normal Line 6 route was displayed in its usual blue line, but now there was an additional segment branching off after Station 37, extending into an area of the map that showed no infrastructure at all. The line extended approximately 2 inches beyond the known route, terminating at a single station marker labeled "Final Stop." We sat in silence for several seconds. The train was stopped, emergency lights active, sitting in a tunnel where we had no scheduled reason to be. Protocol required Carol to contact Central Control and explain the emergency stop. She reached for the radio, then hesitated. "If we report this, they'll order us to continue the route," she said. "We'll end up at that final stop, whatever it is. But if we refuse, if we say we're experiencing a medical emergency or equipment failure, they'll send a rescue train. We won't have to complete this run." I understood what she was suggesting. A way out, a refusal to follow the impossible schedule that had somehow overwritten our known route. It was tempting. But I also knew that if we refused, someone else would be sent to complete this route. Another crew would board this train, would carry these 73 invisible passengers to whatever final stop meant. "We continue," I said, "but we stay together. You don't operate alone, I don't walk the cars alone. We see this through together." Carol nodded slowly. "Okay. But Margaret, I need you to understand something. I've been operating Line 6 for 8 years. I've heard stories. Rumors about late-night runs that don't end where they're supposed to. Crews that complete their shifts and come back different, quiet, like they saw something they can't talk about. I always thought it was bullshit, urban legends that night shift workers tell each other. But this is real. Whatever final stop is, it's real. And we're being directed there for a reason." She restarted the train. We completed the stop at Station 34 without incident. No one boarded. The platform was empty, fluorescent lights buzzing over concrete that showed its age. We departed and continued north following the schedule. Station 35, Station 36, Station 37. Each stop was the same. Empty platforms, no one boarding. But the passenger count on our console remained constant at 73. And the final stop remained on our route display, growing closer with each station we passed. After Station 37, the route should have curved northwest towards Station 38. Instead, the track continued straight, and I realized we were following a section of tunnel I had never seen before despite 11 years of working this line. The tunnel walls looked older. The concrete darker and water-stained. The lighting was sparser, with longer stretches of darkness between maintenance lights. I returned to the passenger cars. I had to see them, had to confirm what was happening. In the third car, where I had seen the first compressed seat, I now saw something else. The seat wasn't just compressed. There was a visible distortion in the air above it, like heat shimmer but cold. As I watched, the distortion became more defined. For just a moment, I could see the outline of a person, not clearly, more like a watermark, a transparency overlaid on the empty space. Male, older, wearing what looked like a work uniform from decades ago. And he was looking directly at me. I stumbled backward, catching myself on a handrail. The image faded, returning to just the compressed seat and the cold air. But I had seen him. One of the 73 passengers who weren't there. I walked through all 6 cars, and in each one I could now see them. Not clearly, not consistently, but in flickering moments when the light hit just right or when my eyes unfocused slightly. 73 people sitting quietly, staring straight ahead or looking out windows that showed only tunnel darkness. Their clothing was from different eras: 1950s work clothes, 1970s casual wear, 1980s business attire, modern clothing from the last decade. They represented decades of passengers, all riding together on this train that had somehow stepped outside normal operations. None of them acknowledged me as I walked past. They simply sat as passive and patient as any late-night passengers completing an unremarkable journey. Except they weren't passengers. They were something else. Recordings, maybe. Echoes. Or something worse. People who had boarded trains on Line 6 and never completed their intended journeys, trapped instead in this perpetual final run. I returned to the operator's cabin just as the tunnel opened into a station platform. Not a modern platform. This one was older, using architectural styles I associated with the original system construction from the early 1900s. Tile work in geometric patterns, wrought iron fixtures, wooden benches that had been preserved but showed their age, and no exit signs, no connecting tunnels. Just a single platform with a single train stopped at it. Our train. The route display confirmed, final stop. Carol looked at me, and I saw in her eyes the same question I was asking myself. Do we open the doors? Before either of us could decide, the door control activated on its own. The pneumatic hiss of the doors opening filled the cabin. Through the connecting door to the passenger cars, I could hear something I hadn't heard since we departed the northern terminus. Movement, footsteps, the rustle of clothing. The quiet sounds of people standing, gathering belongings, preparing to disembark. I walked to the connecting door and looked into the first passenger car. They were visible now, not flickering or transparent, fully present, fully material. 73 people moving down the aisles toward the doors, stepping onto the platform of final stop. They moved with the specific tired shuffle of people at the end of a long journey. People who had finally reached their destination after traveling longer than they'd intended. I recognized several of them. The older man in the work uniform who I had seen flickering in car 3. A woman in 1970s clothing who I had walked past 100 times as a compressed seat and cold air. A teenager in modern clothing who looked exactly like a missing person photo I had seen on a poster at Station 22 3 months ago. She had disappeared after boarding a late-night train, last seen on security footage entering a train car at 1:47 a.m. And now here she was, calmly stepping onto a platform that shouldn't exist, reaching a destination that had somehow always been waiting for her. The last passenger to exit was a man in conductor's uniform from the 1960s. He paused at the door and looked directly at me. His eyes were tired but not unkind. He nodded once, a gesture of recognition or perhaps solidarity. Then he stepped onto the platform and walked away into the shadows beyond the reach of the station lights. The doors closed. Carol and I sat in the operator's cabin, neither of us speaking. On the route display, final stop was still listed, but now it showed as completed. Below it, a new station appeared, Station 38. The route was continuing. We were being offered a way back to the known system, back to the standard route, back to reality. Carol restarted the train. We pulled away from final stop, and as we entered the tunnel, I looked back. The platform was empty. 73 people had disembarked, and now they were simply gone, absorbed into whatever purpose final stop served. The tunnel walls gradually changed, becoming newer, more familiar. Within 5 minutes, we were pulling into Station 38 right on schedule, as if we had never deviated from the standard route. The station was normal. Modern platform, digital displays, a few late-night passengers waiting to board. But of course, no one boarded. Our train was officially out of service at this point, heading back to the depot. We continued to Station 39, Station 40, Station 41, and then to the depot. We arrived at 2:47 a.m., 17 minutes later than our scheduled end time, but within the normal range of variation. We filed our end-of-shift reports. Neither of us mentioned final stop. What would we write? That we had delivered 73 impossible passengers to a station that doesn't exist. That we had seen people who were missing, who were possibly dead, who were certainly not where they were supposed to be according to any rational understanding of the world. Carol and I made an unspoken agreement. We would not discuss what had happened. We would continue working our shifts. We would pretend that Train 1440's final run on that night had been routine and unremarkable. But I know the truth. Line 6 has a hidden station. Final stop exists somewhere in the infrastructure beneath the city, a destination that only becomes accessible under specific conditions, late enough that the city sleeps, with a train that has been running long enough to accumulate the right kind of passengers, with a crew that has seen enough of the night shift's strange hours to be ready for something beyond the standard routes. I've worked 47 more shifts since that night. I still walk the cars, still check tickets, still assist passengers. But now I pay attention to different things. I notice passengers who seem slightly out of phase with their surroundings, whose clothing doesn't quite match the current era, who sit with the particular stillness of people who have been waiting much longer than their ticket would suggest. I see them board at normal stations, traveling among the living passengers, heading toward destinations they may or may not reach. And I wonder, every time I complete that final service run of the night, whether the route display will update, whether a 74th passenger will be added to the count, whether Carol will look at me and we'll both know that we're being called back to final stop, that our turn has come to deliver another collection of lost travelers to their perpetual destination. The trains run on schedule, the routes are fixed, the destinations are clearly marked. But beneath the published maps, there are other routes, other stations, other destinations. And every night, somewhere in the system, a train is diverted from its known path, carrying passengers toward final stop, where journeys end in ways the transit authority doesn't acknowledge and can't control. We are conductors of the living and the lost, and sometimes the line between those categories is far thinner than the bright lights and published schedules would have us believe. Story 5. The engineer who never left the repair log for maintenance line M7 showed the track inspection had been completed 3 days ago. The system confirmed all anomalies had been resolved, all safety checks passed. The line cleared for return to service. But standing on the platform at Station 12 maintenance, staring at the single inspection train waiting with its lights on and its engine running, I knew something was fundamentally wrong, because I had written that repair log. I had completed that inspection. I had closed that work order and marked the line as cleared. 3 days ago I had finished this exact job, and now I was being sent to do it again, as if it had never been completed at all. My name is David Brennan, and I am, or was, the lead engineering supervisor for track maintenance and infrastructure safety for Metropolitan Transit Authority. I hold a master's degree in civil engineering, specialized certifications in railway systems, and 29 years of experience maintaining the underground network that keeps this city mobile. My job is to ensure that every foot of track, every signal system, every power distribution node, every structural element of the tunnels operates within strict safety parameters. When something breaks, when something fails, when something threatens the system's integrity, I'm the one who gets the call. I don't operate passenger trains. I work on maintenance lines, sections of track that are closed to regular service for inspection, repair, and upgrade work. These are the spaces between the spaces passengers see: connector tunnels, switching yards, emergency bypass routes, access corridors. Infrastructure that exists to support the infrastructure everyone else relies on. The work is technical, solitary, and precise. Most inspections I conduct alone using specialized equipment and detailed checklists that cover hundreds of evaluation points. I'm comfortable working in confined spaces, in darkness interrupted only by my equipment lights, in silence broken only by the sound of my own breathing and the ambient noise of the tunnel environment. I've spent thousands of hours in spaces where no passenger ever travels, where the only human presence is maintenance personnel checking systems that must never fail. Maintenance Line M7 is a 6-mile connector tunnel that runs parallel to Line 4, serving as both an emergency bypass and a maintenance access corridor. It was constructed in the 1970s during a major expansion project, and while it was built to modern standards for that era, it had been showing its age. Cracking in the concrete walls, minor water infiltration issues, outdated electrical conduits, sections of track that no longer met current smoothness specifications. 4 months ago, I was assigned to conduct a comprehensive inspection of M7 and develop a remediation plan. I spent 3 weeks walking every section, documenting every deficiency, taking detailed measurements and photographs. Based on that inspection, I developed a repair schedule that would take approximately 6 weeks to complete, working primarily during overnight hours, when the line could be completely shut down without affecting regular service. I began the repair work 8 weeks ago: concrete patching, drainage system upgrades, electrical conduit replacement, track grinding, and alignment correction. It was methodical, unglamorous work, exactly the kind of detailed infrastructure maintenance that keeps a century-old tunnel system functioning safely. I followed my schedule precisely, working 4 nights a week, 6 hours per shift, documenting every completed task, every material used, every system tested and verified. I completed the final repairs 3 days ago, October 19th. I spent that night performing the final safety inspection, verifying that every item on my remediation plan had been addressed to specification. I documented everything, uploaded my photographs and test results to the system, and filed my completion report with infrastructure planning. The report was reviewed and accepted. Maintenance Line M7 was officially cleared for return to service. The work order was closed. I took the following 2 nights off, the first time I'd had consecutive nights off in 2 months. I spent the time catching up on sleep, reviewing plans for my next assignment, and enjoying the simple pleasure of being above ground after 8 weeks of overnight tunnel work. On October 22nd last night, I received an assignment notification. I was being sent back to maintenance line M7 to conduct inspection and repair work. The assignment details were identical to the original work order from 8 weeks ago. Same deficiencies listed, same remediation tasks required, same estimated timeline, as if the past 8 weeks of work had simply never occurred. I assumed it was an administrative error, a clerical mistake where the closed work order had been accidentally reopened. I contacted the infrastructure planning office and explained the situation. The response confused me. According to their records, maintenance line M7 had been scheduled for inspection, but the work had never been initiated. My original completion report from 3 days ago wasn't in their system. When I pulled it up on my own tablet, where I had saved a local copy and showed it to them via shared screen, they confirmed it was properly formatted and detailed, but insisted they had no record of ever receiving it. I checked the system logs. According to the central maintenance database, I had last accessed maintenance line M7 4 months ago during the initial inspection. There were no records of the 6 weeks of repair work I had completed. No material requisitions for the supplies I had used. No logged hours for the shifts I had worked. Nothing. I should have refused the assignment. Should have insisted that there was a database error that needed to be resolved before I returned to M7. But 29 years in this work has taught me that system glitches happen, that administrative databases are imperfect, and that the most reliable source of truth is direct physical inspection. If the computer said M7 hadn't been repaired, but I knew I had completed the work, then I just needed to go to M7 and document the current condition, prove that the repairs existed, and force the database to be corrected. So I accepted the assignment. I gathered my equipment, inspection tools, repair materials, safety gear, and headed to the maintenance depot. I signed out an inspection train, a small motorized unit designed for single-operator use on maintenance lines equipped with storage for tools and materials. I performed my standard pre-departure check, confirmed my route plan with control, and at 11:30 p.m. I entered maintenance line M7. The entrance to M7 is at Station 12 Maintenance, an industrial platform that serves exclusively as a staging area for infrastructure work. No passengers, no public access, just a functional concrete platform with equipment storage, a small control office, and track access. I had entered through this exact platform dozens of times over the past 2 months. It looked exactly as I remembered. I boarded the inspection train and began the slow journey into M7. The tunnel stretched ahead into darkness, illuminated only by my train's headlamps and the sparse maintenance lighting mounted on the tunnel walls. The first section looked correct. This was an area I had repaired early in my schedule, patching significant cracks in the western wall and upgrading a drainage valve that had been leaking. I slowed the train and examined the wall carefully. The cracks were there, not repaired. Raw and obvious, exactly as they had appeared in my initial inspection 4 months ago. The drainage valve was in its original deficient condition, showing the same corrosion and leakage I had documented and repaired. I stopped the train completely and got out, approaching the wall with my inspection flashlight. I touched the cracks, feeling their edges, confirming they were real and unrepaired. Then I pulled out my tablet and found the photographs I had taken after completing the repair work in this section. The photos showed smooth, patched walls and a new drainage valve. But the physical reality in front of me contradicted my documentation. I returned to the train and continued deeper into M7. Every section I checked showed the same pattern. Deficiencies I knew I had repaired were present and untouched. Areas where I had ground and aligned the track showed their original irregularities. Electrical conduits I had replaced were still in their old, outdated housings. It was as if I had never done any work at all. By the time I reached the 3-mile marker halfway through the tunnel, I was experiencing a growing sense of disorientation that bordered on panic. I knew I had completed this work. I had physical evidence on my tablet, hundreds of before and after photographs, detailed logs, test results. But the tunnel itself insisted I was wrong, that none of it had happened. I radioed control. Station 12 Maintenance Control, this is Engineer Brennan on M7 inspection. I need to speak with the supervisor immediately. The response came back promptly. Brennan, this is Control. What's your situation? I'm reporting significant discrepancies between database records and physical tunnel condition. The repairs I completed 3 days ago are not present. The tunnel is in its pre-repair condition. Something is seriously wrong with our documentation systems, or... I trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. Or what? Or I had hallucinated 6 weeks of work? Or I was in the wrong tunnel? Or reality itself had somehow reverted? Brennan, confirm you're referencing repairs you believe you completed 3 days ago? Correct. I filed a completion report on October 19th. The work order was closed, but the physical tunnel shows no evidence of the repairs. A pause. Brennan, our records show you were assigned to M7 inspection today. This is your first entry to that tunnel since the initial survey 4 months ago. There are no records of repair work being completed. That's impossible. I've been working this tunnel for 6 weeks. I have documentation. I have photographs. I have... Brennan! The voice from control interrupted, and there was something in the tone that made me stop. Are you feeling well? Do you need medical assistance? I understood the implication. They thought I was confused, disoriented, possibly experiencing some kind of psychological break. And from their perspective, given what their system showed, that was the only rational explanation. But I knew what I knew. I had spent 6 weeks in this tunnel. I had completed specific, detailed work. I had physical evidence on my tablet. Negative on medical assistance, I said carefully. I'm going to continue the inspection and document current conditions. Brennan out. I put down the radio before they could respond. I needed to think. I needed to understand what was happening. I got out of the train again and stood in the tunnel trying to approach this like any other engineering problem. Observe, measure, analyze, determine root cause. What were the facts? The tunnel showed no evidence of my repair work, but I had detailed documentation proving I had completed that work. The control systems had no record of my work, but I had memories, clear, detailed, specific memories of every night I had spent here, every repair I had performed. Either the tunnel was wrong or I was wrong. And I was starting to suspect a third possibility that was somehow worse than either of those options. I pulled up the completion report on my tablet, the one I had filed 3 days ago. The date stamp showed October 19th, 11:47 p.m. I checked the metadata. The file had been created on my device on that date. It wasn't a fabrication or a corrupted file. It existed exactly as I remembered creating it. I opened my photo gallery and scrolled through the repair documentation. Hundreds of images dated sequentially over 6 weeks, showing the progression of work, before photos showing damage, during photos showing repairs in progress, after photos showing completed work. All dated, all time-stamped, all showing maintenance line M7 and its identifying markers. But the tunnel in front of me contradicted every after photo. The tunnel insisted the work had never been done. I made a decision. I would continue to the end of M7, document the current condition thoroughly, and then return to confront this impossibility with complete data. I boarded the train and resumed the inspection journey. At the 4-mile marker, I found something that changed everything. On the tunnel wall, at approximately eye level, someone had spray-painted a message in red. The paint was fresh, still slightly tacky to the touch. The message read, David Brennan, lead engineer, first entry to M7, today's date. You will not remember this warning. You will not remember any of the following weeks. You will complete your repairs. You will file your report, and then you will be sent back to begin again. This is your 17th iteration. You cannot leave. The tunnel keeps what it needs. I stared at that message for a long time. The handwriting was mine. The information was specific and impossible. 17th iteration. I had been sent to repair M7 17 times, and each time when I completed the work, I was somehow reset. My memory of the completed work erased from both my mind and the official records, leaving only fragmented evidence in my personal device. And then I was sent back to do it again. I walked further along the tunnel wall and found more messages. All in my handwriting, all warnings to myself. They became increasingly desperate as I continued reading. Iteration 4. I tried to refuse the assignment. Woke up in the inspection train already in the tunnel with no memory of agreeing to come here. Iteration 7. Attempted to leave mid-repair. Found myself unable to locate the exit. Tunnels rearranged themselves. 4 hours of driving before I found Station 12 again. Iteration 11. I'm not sure I exist anywhere outside this tunnel anymore. My apartment feels wrong. My memories of anywhere else feel thin like stage sets. Only M7 feels real. Iteration 14. Saw another engineer at the 3-mile marker, asked for help. He looked through me like I wasn't there. I don't think anyone else can see me anymore. Iteration 16. I understand now. The tunnel needs continuous maintenance. It needs someone who knows its every crack, every weakness, every potential failure. It found me. And it's not going to let me leave until I either break completely or become permanent. I'm writing these messages knowing I won't remember them. But maybe eventually enough iterations will create enough evidence that I'll understand before I finish the work. Maybe I can find a way out. I took photographs of every message, then I continued to the end of M7. The 6-mile mark, where the tunnel connects to the emergency bypass for Line 4. The final section showed the same pattern, all deficiencies present, all repairs undone. Except for one thing. At the very end of the tunnel, mounted on the wall near the exit to Line 4's maintenance corridor, was a small metal plaque. Professionally made, permanently mounted. It read, Maintenance Line M7, Primary Engineer David Brennan. Continuous Inspection Protocol initiated October 18th. Estimated completion, never. That date, October 18th, 4 months ago. The date I had begun my initial inspection of M7, but the plaque made it sound like I had never left that inspection, like the past 4 months had been a continuous loop of the same work, erased and repeated. I tried the exit to Line 4's maintenance corridor. The door was locked with a heavy mechanical lock I didn't have keys for. That was wrong. I should have keys for all maintenance access points. They were part of my standard equipment. I checked my key ring. Every key I should have was present, except the exit keys for M7. Those were missing. When had I lost them? Or had I ever had them at all? I turned back and looked down the tunnel I had just traveled. 6 miles of darkness, deficiency, and impossible messages written by iterations of myself I didn't remember being. The tunnel wanted me to stay. Wanted me to continue the endless maintenance cycle. And I was beginning to understand that it had the power to enforce that desire. I radioed control one more time. Station 12 Maintenance Control, this is Brennan. I'm completing the inspection and returning to Station 12. Estimated arrival in 40 minutes. Copy that, Brennan. Everything okay out there? I almost laughed. Everything's fine, just finishing up documentation. Brennan out. I boarded the inspection train and began the return journey. As I drove, I reviewed everything I had learned. The messages, the plaque, the missing memories, the impossible reset between completion and reassignment. I was trapped in a loop. A maintenance engineer caught in infrastructure that needed perpetual attention and had found a way to ensure it received it. But I had evidence now. I had photographs of the messages. I had documentation of multiple iterations. Maybe that would be enough to break the pattern. Maybe when I returned to Station 12, I could show this evidence to someone, force the system to acknowledge what was happening, find a way to break the loop. I reached Station 12 at 1:15 a.m. The platform was empty, as it always was during overnight maintenance hours. I parked the inspection train in its designated storage area, gathered my equipment, and walked toward the control office to file my inspection report. Halfway across the platform, I felt a wave of intense fatigue. Not natural tiredness, but a sudden, overwhelming heaviness that made my legs weak. I sat down on a bench, intending to rest for just a moment before continuing to the office. When I opened my eyes, I was in the inspection train again, parked at Station 12. My equipment was loaded. My tablet showed a new work assignment. Conduct inspection and repair work on maintenance line M7. Estimated duration, 6 weeks. I checked the date. October 22nd, 11:30 p.m. The same moment I had departed for this inspection, or was it? Had any time passed at all? I pulled up my photo gallery, desperate to find the photographs of the messages, the evidence of the 17 iterations. The gallery showed my recent photos, pictures of other maintenance projects. Nothing from M7, no messages on tunnel walls, no plaque announcing my permanent assignment. But in my notes application, I found a single entry I didn't remember writing. It was dated today, time-stamped just minutes ago. It read, "David, you're going to feel like you've never been to M7 before. You're going to accept the assignment normally. That's how it works, but trust yourself. You have been there. Look for your messages. They're real. And for God's sake, don't complete the repairs. The moment you finish, you reset. The only way to break the loop is to leave the work incomplete. Stop working before the end. Get out while there's still something undone. That's the only way I can think of to jam the cycle. Please trust yourself. You're the only one who can help you." I sat in the inspection train, staring at that note. I had no memory of writing it, but the advice was specific and logical. If completing the repairs triggered the reset, then stopping before completion might prevent it. But that meant deliberately leaving maintenance work unfinished. It meant allowing M7 to remain deficient, potentially unsafe. It violated every professional principle I had maintained over 29 years of engineering work. It meant abandoning the very purpose of my existence in this system. And maybe that was the point. Maybe the tunnel had selected me precisely because my commitment to completing work, to maintaining safety, to following procedures was absolute. It knew I would finish. It knew I couldn't walk away from incomplete work. It knew my own professional integrity would trap me in the cycle. I'm sitting here now at Station 12 trying to decide what to do. I can refuse the assignment, but previous iterations apparently tried that and woke up in the tunnel anyway. I can enter M7 and immediately turn around, but will I even be able to find the exit? I can start the work and deliberately sabotage it, leave it incomplete, but will my own conscience allow that? Or maybe I'm already beyond the point of choice. Maybe I've been in M7 for months or years, and this moment of decision is itself part of the loop, a false sense of agency before I inevitably board the train and descend into the tunnel to begin iteration 18. I don't know how much of what I remember is real. I don't know how long I've been doing this. I don't know if there's a version of me that still exists outside this maintenance loop, going to an apartment I think I remember, living a life I believe I have, or if I've already become what the tunnel needed. A permanent maintenance presence, eternally inspecting, eternally repairing, eternally reset before completion, so the work never truly ends. The train is here. The equipment is loaded. M7 is waiting. And according to every system, every record, every database the MTA maintains, this will be my first time conducting inspection work in that tunnel. Everything will feel new. Everything will feel like a fresh assignment, except for the messages I'll find on the walls. Messages from versions of myself I don't remember being. Warnings about a trap I'm already caught in. Evidence of iterations that have been erased from every record except the tunnel itself. I'm going to enter M7 now. But I'm not going to complete the work. I'm going to inspect, I'm going to document, but I'm going to leave at least one repair deliberately undone. And I'm going to write another message on the wall, another warning for the next iteration, another piece of evidence that might eventually accumulate into understanding. Maybe that's all I can do. Keep leaving messages, keep building evidence. Keep hoping that enough iterations will create enough accumulated information that someday, somehow, I'll break the pattern. Or maybe I'll just keep writing messages to myself forever, an engineer who never left the tunnel, maintaining infrastructure that doesn't need fixing, completing work that never stays completed, trapped in a maintenance loop that has no end. The tunnel hums, the inspection train waits, and somewhere deep in maintenance line M7, my previous warnings are already written on walls I don't remember painting, marking iterations I don't remember living, documenting a trap that's already closed around me. Story 6, The Echoing Dispatch. I've listened to thousands of transmissions in my 12 years working overnight at Central Control. Voice calls from operators reporting delays, emergency broadcasts coordinating crisis response, maintenance crews requesting clearance for track access, system alerts, passenger queries, automated status updates. I know every type of transmission that can come through this board. But when the speakers crackled to life at 3:33 a.m. with a voice that sounded exactly like mine, describing a catastrophic system failure that would kill 17 people in 4 hours, I understood that I was about to receive the most important transmission of my career. The transmission I would eventually make, from a future I was apparently destined to experience, unless I could figure out how to change it. My name is Jonathan Hayes, and I am a senior control room technician for Metropolitan Transit Authority's Central Operations Center. I work the overnight shift from midnight to 8 a.m., managing the digital infrastructure that coordinates train movements, monitors system health, processes automated alerts, and serves as the communications hub for all overnight operations. I'm not a train operator or track engineer. I'm the technical backbone that keeps the computerized systems running while the city sleeps and the reduced overnight service operates on automated protocols. My workspace is Central Control Room 3, located 5 floors beneath the main transit headquarters. It's a windowless room approximately 30 feet by 40 feet, lined wall-to-wall with monitors, servers, communication arrays, and control interfaces. During the day, this room holds 8 technicians managing different subsystems. At night, I work alone, overseeing automated processes and responding to exceptions that require human judgment. The overnight shift has a particular quality. The reduced train frequency means fewer real-time decision points. The automation handles 90% of operations without human intervention. Most nights, my actual work consists of monitoring status boards, responding to the occasional maintenance crew communication, and conducting routine system diagnostics. It's solitary, quiet work that suits people who are comfortable with technology and uncomfortable with excessive human interaction. I've been working this shift for 12 years. I know these systems better than I know people. I understand the logic flows, the fail-safe protocols, the redundancy architectures. I can diagnose a signal routing error by the pattern of indicator lights. I can predict system behavior 3 steps ahead based on current conditions. The automation is sophisticated, but it's not intelligent. It requires human judgment at critical points, and I've trained myself to recognize those points instinctively. The night it started was a Wednesday in late November, unseasonably cold with temperatures dropping below freezing above ground. Cold weather creates specific challenges for underground transit systems, ice formation and ventilation systems, electrical connection problems, rail expansion and contraction issues. I had arrived for my shift expecting to manage cold weather protocols and monitor for temperature-related system alerts. The first 4 hours were routine. I processed automated reports, monitored the reduced train schedule, conducted diagnostic checks on heating systems to ensure tunnel temperatures remained stable. By 3:30 a.m., the entire system was operating normally. All trains on schedule. No maintenance emergencies, no equipment failures, just the steady, predictable hum of automated transit operations proceeding exactly as designed. At 3:33 a.m., one of my communication panels lit up with an incoming transmission. The indicator showed it was coming through on the emergency broadcast frequency, the channel reserved for system-wide critical alerts. I immediately focused on that panel, expecting to hear from a train operator or maintenance supervisor reporting a serious situation. I activated the receive mode. The speakers crackled, and I heard a voice. My voice, speaking with stress and urgency, but unmistakably me. Central Control, this is Senior Technician Hayes broadcasting emergency alert at 7:17 a.m. We have experienced a catastrophic automation failure in the Eastern Sector switching system. Multiple trains have received conflicting route instructions. I'm confirming 17 fatalities from the collision at Station 47. I repeat, 17 confirmed deaths. This is not a drill. Initiating full system shutdown and emergency response protocols. All personnel respond to Station 47 immediately. The transmission cut off. Silence returned to the control room. I sat frozen, staring at the communication panel. The timestamp on the transmission had registered as 7:17 a.m., 3 hours and 44 minutes in the future. But I had just heard it now at 3:33 a.m. I checked the status boards. All systems showed normal operation. No alerts for the Eastern Sector switching system. No trains reporting problems. No indication of any impending catastrophic failure. Everything was exactly as it should be. I played back the transmission from the recorded buffer. It was there, captured clearly. My voice, my specific speech patterns, my use of terminology. And the background sounds were consistent with this control room. The ambient hum of the server arrays, the subtle echo pattern of this specific acoustic space. That transmission had originated here, from this room, from me. But I hadn't sent it, or I hadn't sent it yet. The transmission was from the future, from me, 4 hours from now, broadcasting an emergency that hadn't happened yet. I needed to understand this rationally. I considered the possibilities. A recording of my voice had been manipulated and transmitted as a prank or test. But the speech patterns were too natural, the stress too genuine, and the technical details, referencing the Eastern Sector switching system, Station 47, specific protocol language, were too accurate. I was experiencing an auditory hallucination, possibly from fatigue or stress. But the transmission was recorded in the system buffer. It wasn't just in my head. The transmission was real, and somehow communications were bleeding through time, past and future, overlapping in the infrastructure. That third option was impossible, but it was also the only explanation that fit the evidence. I pulled up detailed diagnostics for the Eastern Sector switching system. This system controlled the automated routing for 6 train lines, managing the complex series of track switches that allowed trains to change lines, avoid maintenance areas, and respond to delays. It was one of the most critical automation systems in the network, with multiple redundancies and continuous health monitoring. Every diagnostic showed normal operation. No errors, no warning indicators, no predictive alerts suggesting impending failure. The system was functioning exactly as designed, but according to the transmission from my future self, this system was going to fail catastrophically in less than 4 hours. And that failure would result in a collision at Station 47 that would kill 17 people. I needed more information. I needed to understand what was going to happen so I could prevent it. I monitored the emergency broadcast frequency continuously, waiting to see if any more transmissions would come through. At 4:15 a.m., the speakers crackled again, my voice now sounding exhausted and defeated. Central Control, this is Hayes at 9:30 a.m. Emergency services are still on scene at Station 47. We've completed preliminary investigation of the switching system failure. The root cause was a timing error in the synchronization protocol between the primary and backup control systems. The error created a race condition that resolved incorrectly, sending Train 840 and Train 623 conflicting route instructions. Both trains were directed onto the same track section at Station 47. Neither operator had sufficient time to brake. The collision was unavoidable once the error resolved. Another transmission from the future, this one providing technical details about the failure mechanism. I immediately pulled up the synchronization protocol documentation for the Eastern Sector system. The protocol was complex, managing microsecond-level timing between redundant control systems to ensure seamless failover if the primary system encountered problems. I began analyzing the protocol logic, looking for scenarios that could create a race condition. After 30 minutes of detailed review, I found it. A specific sequence of events involving simultaneous primary system alerts and backup system activation could theoretically create a timing conflict. The protocol had error handling logic designed to resolve such conflicts, but the logic assumed the two systems would never be more than a few milliseconds out of sync. If the synchronization drift exceeded certain thresholds, the error resolution could make incorrect assumptions about train positions. It was a theoretical vulnerability, one that should never be triggered under normal operations. The synchronization systems were designed to prevent drift beyond the safe threshold, but vulnerabilities have a way of manifesting under the right or wrong combination of circumstances. I checked the current synchronization status. The primary and backup systems were synchronized within acceptable parameters, but they were closer to the threshold than I would have expected. The drift was increasing slowly, a pattern I might not have noticed if I wasn't specifically looking for it. Something was causing the synchronization to degrade. If it continued degrading at the current rate, it would cross the threshold at approximately 7 a.m. Right when morning service would be ramping up. Right when Train 840 and Train 623 would be entering the Eastern Sector. I had found the mechanism. Now I needed to prevent it. I could manually force a resynchronization of the systems, reset them to zero drift. That would eliminate the immediate danger. I could also submit a priority service ticket to have engineers review the synchronization system today, before the problem manifested. I executed the manual resynchronization. The command processed normally. The drift reset to zero. The system showed perfect synchronization. Crisis averted. I sat back, feeling a mixture of relief and unease. I had prevented a disaster based on information from the future. 17 people would live who otherwise would have died. But I still didn't understand how I had received that information. How had transmissions from hours ahead reached me now? At 5:47 a.m., another transmission came through. My voice, speaking quietly. Central Control, this is Hayes at 11:15 a.m. I need to make a personal log entry. The resynchronization I performed at 4:45 a.m. successfully prevented the Station 47 collision. All systems are operating normally. But I don't understand what happened. How did I receive those transmissions? Where did they come from? I've reviewed all system logs. There's no record of any emergency broadcasts before 7:17 a.m. But I know I heard them. I know I acted on information from transmissions that apparently never happened, or did happen in a timeline I somehow changed. I don't know what's real anymore. I was listening to my own future confusion, and I understood the paradox I, was experiencing. If I successfully prevented the disaster, then the emergency broadcasts I received would never be sent. They would exist only as echoes from a timeline that no longer occurred. The transmissions that saved 17 lives would have no source, no origin point. They would be impossible information, causally disconnected from any reality. At 6:33 a.m., just as the morning service was beginning to ramp up, I received a different kind of transmission. Not my voice this time. A female voice I didn't recognize, speaking with clinical detachment. "Jonathan Hayes, you are receiving these transmissions because you exist at a junction point. The transit system's infrastructure carries more than trains. It carries information, time, possibility. Certain individuals, those who spend enough time alone in the deep infrastructure, develop sensitivity to temporal echoes. You're hearing broadcasts from probable futures, warning signals from timelines that haven't solidified yet. By hearing them, by acting on them, you collapse the probability wave. You select which future manifests. We have been monitoring you for 18 months. You've prevented 4 major disasters without consciously realizing it. Incidents you attributed to your own diagnostic intuition were actually responses to future transmissions you received but didn't consciously recognize. Tonight is the first time you've become fully aware of the process. And now, you must make a choice. Continue in this role, serving as a temporal junction point, receiving warnings and preventing disasters. Or request transfer to a different position, a different role that won't place you at this specific convergence of infrastructure and information. Choose carefully. The system needs you, but this knowledge will change you." The transmission ended. No opportunity to respond, no follow-up. Just that impossible message from an unknown source explaining that I had somehow become a bridge between timelines. A receiver for warnings from futures that hadn't happened yet. I finished my shift in a state of numb confusion. Morning service proceeded normally, no disasters, no emergencies. 17 people traveled through Station 47 without realizing how close they had come to dying in a collision that I had prevented by acting on information from a future that no longer existed. I filed a standard end-of-shift report. I documented the manual resynchronization I had performed, listed it as a preventive maintenance action based on diagnostic review. I made no mention of the transmissions. Who would I tell? What would I say that wouldn't result in psychological evaluation and removal from duty? Over the following weeks, I received more transmissions, not every night, but regularly enough that I understood this was now a permanent feature of my role. Future emergencies bleeding backward through time, reaching me as warnings, giving me the opportunity to prevent disasters that hadn't happened yet. I prevented a fire in the electrical distribution system at Station 12. I averted a signal failure that would have caused a 3-train pileup in the central tunnel. I identified a structural weakness in tunnel section 17 that would have caused a partial collapse. Each time I heard transmissions from my future self broadcasting emergencies, and each time I used that information to prevent the situation from occurring. Each prevention created a paradox. The emergency I prevented never happened, which meant the warning transmission technically should never have been sent. But I had received it. I had acted on it. And the result was a safety record so perfect that my supervisors began commenting on my exceptional performance. They attributed it to my deep understanding of the systems, my ability to identify problems before they manifested. They didn't know I was literally receiving advance warning from timelines where I had failed to identify those problems where people had died, where I had broadcast emergencies after the fact. But there was a cost. The transmissions weren't just information, they were experiences. When I heard my voice broadcasting that 17 people had died at Station 47, I experienced the emotional weight of that disaster, even though it never actually occurred. The grief, the guilt, the horror, all of it was real to the version of me who sent that transmission from the failed timeline. And by receiving it, I absorbed those emotions. I began experiencing memories of events that hadn't happened. I remembered standing in this control room watching security feeds from Station 47, seeing the aftermath of the collision. I remembered coordinating with emergency services, providing access for rescue teams, delivering testimony at the investigation. But those events never occurred in this timeline. They were bleeding through from the prevented futures, phantom memories from versions of me who had lived through different outcomes. 4 months ago, I started keeping a journal, not an official log, but a personal record of every transmission I received and every disaster I prevented. The journal now contains descriptions of 23 prevented emergencies, 23 futures where people died, where infrastructure failed, where the system collapsed in ways large and small. I'm the only person who knows these events almost happened. I'm carrying the memory of disasters that didn't occur, deaths that didn't manifest, emergencies that exist only in timelines that collapsed when I acted on advance warning. Last week, I received a transmission that changed everything. It came through at 2:17 a.m., my voice speaking slowly and carefully. Jonathan, this is you from 8 years in the future. I need you to understand what you're becoming. Every transmission you receive, every disaster you prevent, every timeline you collapse, it's anchoring you outside normal causality. You're starting to exist across multiple timelines simultaneously. That's why you're getting the phantom memories. That's why you're experiencing events that didn't happen. You're not just receiving information from possible futures anymore. You're actually living them, experiencing them, carrying them with you. In my timeline, in my present, I can perceive approximately 40 concurrent timelines. I experience 40 variations of each moment, 40 different outcomes, 40 versions of reality. I can barely function. I can barely maintain a single conversation because I'm simultaneously having 40 conversations across 40 timelines. You need to stop. You need to request transfer while you still exist primarily in a single timeline. If you continue, if you keep preventing disasters, you'll end up like me, scattered across so many possibilities that you lose any solid sense of self. Please, Jonathan, stop listening to the future. Let some of the disasters happen. Re-anchor yourself in a single timeline before it's too late. I listened to that transmission 5 times, then I deleted it from the system buffer. I couldn't let that warning stop me, because the alternative, allowing disasters to happen when I had the ability to prevent them, was ethically impossible. So I continue. I work my overnight shifts. I monitor the systems and I listen for transmissions from futures I hope will never happen. Each warning I receive, each disaster I prevent pushes me further outside normal time. I'm starting to experience moments where I can see the branches, the decision points where reality could flow different directions. I'm starting to perceive the alternate versions of my colleagues, the ghost images of people as they exist in timelines where different choices were made. I think I understand now what that clinical voice told me months ago. I'm at a junction point, not just geographically in this control room, but temporally. I'm positioned at a convergence where multiple possible futures channel through. And by perceiving those futures, by acting on the warnings they send back, I'm becoming something that exists outside any single timeline. I'm becoming an intersection, a decision node, a human failsafe through which possibility flows and collapses into actuality. The system needs this. The infrastructure we built to move people through space has somehow created a side effect, the ability to move information through time. And someone has to be positioned to receive that information, to act as the bridge between what might happen and what actually manifests. But the human mind wasn't designed for this. We're built to experience linear time, single realities, one consistent flow of cause and effect. By operating as a temporal junction point, I'm experiencing something human consciousness was never meant to process. And it's slowly fragmenting me across the possibilities I navigate. Last night I received a transmission from 17 hours in the future. My voice, speaking with a calmness that sounded more like resignation than peace. Central Control, this is Jonathan Hayes making my final log entry at 9:00 p.m. I'm requesting immediate transfer to any position that doesn't involve overnight system monitoring. I can no longer maintain coherent function in this role. I'm experiencing 53 concurrent timelines simultaneously. I can't distinguish which version of events is the primary timeline anymore. I've been trying to prevent a disaster in Tunnel Section 22, but I don't know which timeline the disaster occurs in. I've taken preventive actions in multiple timelines, but I can't verify which actions are real and which are phantom memories. I need to stop. I need to exist in a single timeline again before I completely lose coherence. This is Jonathan Hayes, signing off from Central Control. That transmission is my future. I will reach a breaking point. I will request transfer. I will walk away from this junction point before it completely dissolves my sense of singular identity. But I haven't requested that transfer yet, because tonight, at my current timestamp, I'm still receiving warnings. I'm still preventing disasters. I'm still choosing which futures manifest and which collapse. And in this moment, in this timeline, I'm listening to the silence of the control room, waiting for the next transmission from a future that might not happen if I act correctly now. The systems hum around me. The monitors glow with steady data streams. The overnight operations proceed automatically. And somewhere in the infrastructure, in the cables and servers and communication arrays, information is flowing backward through time, warnings seeking recipients, futures calling out to prevent themselves. I'm Jonathan Hayes. I work overnight at Central Control, and I'm learning that sometimes the most important transmissions aren't the ones we send, but the ones we receive from versions of ourselves who existed long enough to warn us about what's coming. The question I can't answer is whether those warnings save us or trap us, whether preventing disasters is an act of heroism or a slow dissolution into temporal incoherence. But until I find that answer, I'll keep listening. I'll keep acting. I'll keep standing at this junction point between what is and what might be, collapsing possibilities into actualities one prevented disaster at a time. Even if it means experiencing every timeline, every disaster, every death that almost happened but didn't, even if it means fragmenting across so many possibilities that I forget which version of me is real. Even if it means becoming an echo myself, a warning transmitted backward through time, hoping that someone will hear and understand and prevent what I couldn't. The speakers are silent now, but they won't stay silent. They never do. Somewhere in the future, hours or days or years ahead, I'm broadcasting again, warning myself about what's coming, sending information backward through the infrastructure that connects all our moments into a network of possibility. And I'll be here, listening, waiting for my own voice to tell me what I need to prevent next. Because that's what it means to work at the junction. That's what it means to exist where time bleeds through itself. That's what it means to be the person who hears the disasters before they happen and carries the weight of all the futures we manage to avoid. Some warnings come too late. Others arrive before you're ready to understand them. And sometimes, the most dangerous warnings are the ones we send to ourselves, from futures we're destined to experience but might still have time to change.